Hello and welcome to the Wellness Trinity podcast, where we interview top holistic experts and bring you natural solutions for modern day wellness. Let's get started with your host, Dr. Jacqueline.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining the Wellness Trinity podcast. I'm Dr. Jacqueline from thewellnesstrinity.com, where we provide natural solutions for modern day wellness. So today we're going to discuss the gut-brain connection. I have a special guest on the show. But before we get into that, I'm going to just go over a little disclaimer. What we discuss in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. What you do with the information is to be used at your discretion, as the recommendations are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases. So just a little ad before we get started as well. This episode was sponsored by CellCore Biosciences. Creating supplements that work is what they do, and restoring hope and health is who they are. I have been using CellCore's products and protocols for the last year, and I've seen incredible results with my personal clients. CellCore provides solutions to modern day health challenges, which help people regain their energy and have their health back. I am now one of their account managers for Oregon and the Nevada region. So if you're in that area, I'm your go-to girl. And if you are not, and you would like to become a CellCore provider, I can still help you get to the right person. And to the general public, if you're curious about their in-depth detox protocol, which is absolutely amazing, then I personally walk through this protocol with my clients, and you can visit thewellnesstrinity.com/CellCoreDetox. So today I have Dr. Steph Canestraro on the show, and I met her at actually the CellCore Eco Workshop a few weeks ago, and we really clicked. We were talking about pregnancy and athletes and all kinds of fun stuff, and especially in the realm of functional medicine and how all that relates to it. There's a huge connection with people's state of health and how they're doing in their pregnancy, how they're doing athletically, and so many more different ways that she's going to dive into as well today. So Dr. Stephanie Canestraro is a functional medicine practitioner through the renowned Institute for Functional Medicine. She is a chiropractor by trade and amalgamates the two worlds with a very unique approach to help her patients attain ultimate wellness. Her passion for helping others recover from chronic conditions related to gut-brain connections comes from her personal battle with brain-based inflammation that stemmed from serious undiagnosed gastrointestinal issues. She now uses her insights to help eliminate symptoms of any gut-brain associated diseases or just increased overall vitality using advanced functional medicine testing, individualized supplement protocols, lifestyle medicine, acupuncture, soft tissue techniques, and mind-body techniques. She works with everyone from athletes in the NFL, NHL, PGA, professional tennis players, Hollywood actresses to autistic children. She attributes her success to always learning and consulting with multiple experienced mentors in her field. So Dr. Steph, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on here. And like you just mentioned, we really clicked when we were just talking about toxicity and pregnancy and athletes. And I'm glad that we actually got to set aside a time, especially, I guess we have more time now with our.
Yeah, I know this world is definitely on fire a little bit, and it's definitely not something that any of us want to go through with this coronavirus and all the lockdowns and everything. But on the other side, we get to do more fun things like this, where we can spread the word about natural health and wellness and getting to root causes of people's challenges here. So why don't we just start, and why don't you give some testimonies that you've dealt with athletes? Because I know you deal with a lot of athletes.
Yeah, so I work with athletes. I started off just solely with a manual practice as a chiropractor. And so a lot of my first clients were actually NHL players. So I had done an externship with someone who was working with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm from Toronto. And so those people ended up being my clients or patients. And at that time, I was, as you mentioned in my bio, I was going through my own health struggles. And I had found functional medicine, and I found, I was slowly being able to heal. And it was a whole bunch of strange symptoms that I had, but like one of them had been anxiety. And you know, I would share my story with the athletes that I was treating, and then they would start to open up a little bit more about what was going on, not just from like a mechanical perspective, but anxiety, gastrointestinal issues. And so I started treating them as my functional medicine patients as well. And I found so many interesting and common findings with them. But what they report after doing all the testing, you know, we're clearing gut bugs, we're helping bring down their total body burden or toxic load, you know, different lifestyle changes. And they started feeling, you know, better on the ice. They had more cardio endurance. They would get hit into the boards, which would be like a normal occurrence, and they wouldn't feel as beat up, and they needed less treatment. And then when I was treating them, what I noticed is their tissue started feeling better. So some patients that they have this, like, you know, kind of their fascia feels stuck. Like it feels like a lot of hard work to kind of get them moving. Their tissue doesn't feel as healthy. And then I started noticing that they were feeling much healthy, responding to treatment better. I had to do less work. They had to, again, like I said, get less treatment. So I think that overall, when I look at as a whole of the people that are performing, that have done the functional medicine, they just all seem to have better seasons. They're getting contracts that maybe they wouldn't have had access to. So it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, I love the fact that you marry those two fields together. I have a background in personal training, and I used to find too that this is actually before I even got into all this functional medicine stuff and naturopathy and things of that sort. I used to find that people would even have a hard time losing weight or sticking to a workout program, because now I realize, because they were really just not healthy on a cellular level. And obviously exercise is a huge part of that. But if our adrenals are thrown off, or our thyroid is all thrown off, and we have all these gut bugs, I mean, it's going to be very hard to get up even in the morning and to just function, let alone try to exercise and perform your best if you're an athlete. So
yeah, and like a lot of these guys are performing at this high level still, but it's almost like I also see a lot of alumni, so a lot of ex-NHL players, and you know, they're a mess after they're done. It's kind of like, you know, you're protecting them in the long term from these chronic issues. A lot of them are getting joint replacements, and you know, they're kind of aging really poorly, and so you're kind of trying to protect them from that as well, not just like the short term helping them to perform better.
Can you expand on why they would be aging faster?
Well, I mean, I kind of explained their population, or what, as like a micro economy or society they go through, and it's you know, so their circadian rhythm is one that comes to mind first. At a time when the rest of us are kind of, you know, calming down for the night, they're ramping up to entertain us and to play a game of hockey. They're napping during the day, and then they're flying home right after the games. Like, so there's a lot of flying. We know there's a lot of toxicity in flying. There's viruses, there's radiation, there's different chemicals that you want to protect them from. They're not getting to bed at a decent time. They're staring at screens. They're stressed out because they do have like a lot of pressure on them from media, from fans, from their own mental stress, family. And so, and although we all have that, I think it's magnified when you have kind of the media overlooking that as well. And they're also not in control really of what they're eating, like their food quality. They're on the road a lot. They're eating what they're given. Their schedule's kind of set out for them, and they don't have a lot of wiggle room to play around with that. So I think that they end up having a lot of toxicity, and no one teaches them how to deal with it, right? So, and no one teaches them to either calm their mind, or, you know, it's the coaches, the way and they're over treated with even injections. Like they have they're put on antibiotics more. They're, you know, they have every vaccine all the time. So like there's a whole bunch of different toxins that they get exposed to, that they're not taught to detox. The teams don't look in, or they haven't historically looked into their DNA. How are they detoxing? Functional tests, what actually looks like, how their body's functioning, nutrient deficiencies, all of their gut bugs, and they all share water bottles. They overfeed on pasta, right? Like they're still doing like pre-game pasta, then the night before is pasta. Like it's just high grain, high starch, like low quality kind of food, a lot of them. So, and it was even worse before. So those alumni, their joints are kind of a mess. They have different chronic diseases that come along with aging, but I'd say overall that they're aging poorly. There's also the whole trauma of them. They get hit a lot, right? So this whole CTE kind of, you know, mechanism where you have not only a hit to the head that's actually physically, but I explain it to people like a hit to the head is when you have a bacterial overgrowth and you eat a big bowl of pasta that's non-organic and filled with glyphosate. You know what I mean? So there's different ways that we're getting affecting their brains, and so they have a lot of mental emotional issues.
Yeah. Well, that just sounds like a nightmare the way you described it. Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm dealing mostly with the general public, not athletes or people with that type of status, but it seems like for my general public clients, it's almost magnified because of all of that extra stuff that's going on. I mean, the general public doesn't have necessarily the media after them. They're not necessarily traveling around all the time and not in control of their food. And then having to perform at that high level and getting hit all the time is like a whole nother situation in and of itself. So why don't we dial in and talk about why your motto is heal the gut first?
So heal the gut first, that comes from, you know, my personal struggles. So I was having gastrointestinal symptoms my entire life that eventually turned into severe neurological symptoms. And, you know, and a tentative diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, like based on these very scary neurological symptoms and a plethora of other symptoms. And, you know, I remember I kept going into my doctor and I'm being like, well, do you think it has anything to do with my stomach, with my diet, with what I'm eating? And I got like the typical thing that people got where, no, this has nothing to do with your diet. You just have irritable bowel, like go home, learn how to deal with it, or it's going to ebb and flow and kind of like just brush you off. And so that was my experience for most of my early years when I had no medical experience whatsoever. And, you know, as my digestive system got worse, and then also stress came in on top of it, and I was a student maybe living in a little bit of a toxic environment, you know, all of those things kind of came together. But I think the biggest thing was my gut, because if my gut was strong, I could have probably dealt with all those other things. And then it turned into these really scary neurological symptoms, where I thought I was having strokes. I was in and out of the hospital. They were injecting me with the dye and putting you in the CAT scan, and, you know, your brain looks okay. But I was not able to stand up. I was having to use like a wall to walk. And that was only one of my symptoms, one of many. And it turned out it was 100% associated with my gut and what I was eating. It was gluten ataxia, and my cerebellum was getting inflamed and attacked based on the fact that I'm highly sensitive to gluten. Like I had a damaged small intestinal lining, which is what people get with celiac disease. But then if you don't have the actual gene, they don't call it celiac disease. But regardless of what it was all stemming from my gut and, you know, my lack of nutrient absorption. And it's a place, so healing your gut first, it's a place we can access with people. We can change what you put in your mouth. We can find out what gut bugs you have and get rid of ones that are less beneficial. We can increase your beneficial ones. We can work on, you know, indirectly on your vagus nerve that helps your gut. Like it's just accessible. And, you know, even if you look back to like Hippocrates and, you know, all disease begins in the gut, like, and you and I are starting to see it. When you strengthen someone's gastrointestinal system, they have less symptoms everywhere else in their body, including anxiety and in their brain.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So you mentioned the vagus nerve, and I know you're an expert at that. So why don't you explain what that is and just expand on that? What is the vagus nerve? Why is this so important when we're talking about that gut-brain connection?
So the vagus nerve is one of our cranial nerves, which means it begins in our brain, and it's cranial nerve 10. It's called the vagus nerve because if you think of the base of the word, it's like a vaga or a vagabond or a vagrant, because it's the wandering nerve. So it's the longest sensory nerve in our body. It starts in, like I said, in our brain, and it innervates our heart, our liver, our kidney, our whole intestinal tract down to our colon, not all the way to the descending colon, but it takes information from what's going on those organs, and it relays it back up to the brain, and then it can affect all of those organs, including your gut, which is if you look at a picture of the vagus nerve, most of its attention is going to your gut and your intestines, and it communicates with your gut in numerous ways, through immune cells that are in your gut, through the enteric nervous system, which are all of the nerves that is a whole separate nervous system that is around our whole small intestine, colon, and we have more nerve endings in our enteric nervous system than we do in our spinal cord. So there's just tons of information that's relayed back and forth to the brain, and we now know that the vagus nerve, even if you don't actually treat gut infections, if you don't change the actual terrain of the gut, we now know that they're doing electrical implants on the vagus nerve, and they're curing diseases just from stimulating the vagus nerve on its own. Wow. Like reversing multiple sclerosis or other rheumatoid arthritis and other, like, so I know like a lot more studies going to go into it, but this vagus nerve has control over our parasympathetic side of our nervous system, so our rest and digest side of our nervous system, as opposed to our sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, which most of us are in this like kind of rat race, busy lifestyle, mental stress. Like a lot of that is just we've lost the balance. So I just think the vagus nerve is really important, based on that and numerous other reasons.
So how do you go about fixing it or treating it?
So, you know, outside in and inside out. So the vagus nerve, it's already known that, you know, treatment of your neck, your vagus nerve, if it exits back here, comes down and goes down under your clavicle and innervates everything that I talked about before. And you have access to it. You have access to treat it like manually when someone's neck is tight. So there's like a manual aspect. You can treat their jaw. You can get them to do exercises because it innervates your gag reflex. So you can do gargling, humming, singing, anything like that is going to be one of the ways that we can exercise the vagus nerve, or we can actually treat it. We can do acupuncture from the outside in, right? You can even I even do abdominal massages on people, and, you know, free up any like tension or tightness or scar tissue that you feel. And then there's from the inside out is where I'm talking about, where we start to access it through healing the gut, right? If you have an inflamed gut, if you have lots of overgrowths, if you don't have enough stomach acid, all of these things. Well, first of all, if you don't have enough stomach acid, that's one of the things that the vagus nerve does. So if you're too stressed all the time, then you're not even making the stomach acid that is stimulated through the vagus nerve. But yeah, so treating the gut, healing up the gut lining, getting the immune system right, bringing inflammation down, because then when the vagus nerve is taking information from our actual gut, then when it brings it up to the brain, it's not saying, Mayday, Mayday, you know, we need to go on high alert or create immune cells or whatever it is. So that's how I'm attacking it, or not attacking it, but addressing it.
Yeah. I love that there's all these different approaches that you put into it, because that's always my idea too. Now, I don't do any type of like physical therapy or chiropractic work, but even just using things topically, like essential oils as well too. I mean, that
Of course, yeah, rubbing essential oils.
yeah, and then attacking it from the inside out. Both ways are so important. Like using you obviously are a chiropractor, so you use all these different modalities with structure, which is important as well too. I mean, like you said, if the hockey player and someone in the NFL are getting hit in the head, I mean that everything's just going to be thrown off. So how do we expect our body to be able to circulate our blood well and other things, that nutrients and everything that needs to get to the right place if our structure is thrown off?
Exactly.
So okay, so the vagus nerve, it goes, does it go both ways? Like the gut goes to the brain and the brain goes to the gut?
Yeah, but 80% are afferent, which means it's collecting information from different organs and bringing it back up to the brain, and 20% are actually having the effects and making changes. So it's a huge kind of scanning system to see kind of what's going on in our body. So that I think is huge, because if 80% of that like huge nerve is just scanning and assessing and taking information back up to the brain, like that's how important what's going on in our gut is to the rest of our body.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And if you think of our gut, it's like a hub, and there's some research that I listened to someone recently talking about, and it's kind of like even the bugs that live in our gut, how healthy they are, it's like a hub for the microbiomes in the rest of our body. So our nasal microbiome, our oral microbiome, our wherever we have an orifice, we have a microbiome. Even our skin has a microbiome. So the health, and it's like, so it's like the central intelligence. It's like, and then there's a whole bunch of different if you think of central CIA, and then there's all these different satellite kind of CIA, you know what I mean though? And so they're the ones making the huge decision and influencing what happens in these other areas of our body.
Okay. So you use the CellCore protocol, right? The detox protocol?
I love CellCore.
Yeah. Well, and that's obviously why I met you too, because you're at the seminar. But it seems like even just within the last couple months, things have been rapidly, I don't know if I should say changing, but new things being incorporated into the protocol. So how long have you been using the products, first of all?
I was an early adopter. Like they only had a couple products when I first started working with them.
Okay. And then you've used the general protocol that they've been designing for the last couple of years too, or?
Yeah, I would follow it as closely as I can. I'd add a little bit here on there in there based on testing, but I mean, I have people now that I'm doing solely just their protocol, and I'm having amazing results.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what is it addressing?
So, I mean, if you look at their protocol, it's taking steps and first addressing drainage or detox. So when we say drainage, we're talking about what actually, when we talk, people know about detox, and it's your liver's always detoxing. If we weren't detoxing, we wouldn't be alive. So we have detox, but we're not all draining very well. So the first phase, they're really focusing on draining, like making sure gallbladder, pancreas, liver are all dumping what they need to, but then it's actually exiting the body. So, phase 3 detox is actually passing enough stool, and a lot of people are constipated. So it's working on getting those bowels moving, and along with how it can be like gut infections that stop the bowel from moving, it actually, the vagus nerve is in charge of that too. So you're working on the actual drainage through their protocol, and then getting them to do some vagal nerve exercises and then really get their bowels moving. And then the second phase is really cleaning up parasites, you know, bacterial overgrowths, candida, all of those kind of things that we were talking about that cause inflammation in the gut lining. They cause you to absorb their toxins. They're taking in our nutrients and giving off toxins as opposed to something that our body needs, which is what good bacteria does. And so we're getting rid of those. And so we're doing a cleaning of our bowel per se. And then we're kind of, the next phase, we're building up the immune system, getting a deeper clean, and then people are feeling way better. They're feeling, and then there's the maintenance protocol, which, I mean, I'm always on stuff like biotoxin binder. I always take minerals. I take the Mitochondria just because of how damaged I was. But even me personally, I don't even know how many protocols I've done on myself. And I was feeling pretty good when I found the CellCore Mimosa Pudica. That was the first thing I used of theirs. And I would say my stomach would be like, 30% of the time it would still be acting up on me and I wasn't feeling well. And then after using Para 1, Para 2, and that's all I used at that time, and a binder, I mean, it was life-changing for me. And then I like started, okay, what are these people doing? And I start listening to all their talks, and I start, and then I'm like, oh, TUDCA, this sounds like something I need. And then I start taking TUDCA, and then I used to always have tons of pain during menstruation, like extreme, like I'd have to take days off. And, then I introduced that, and, it supports my liver further. And I've done liver support, I've done liver cleanses and detoxes. And, I add in TUDCA, and I have this huge change where I'm actually functioning every day of the month, which you really should. But it was the last thing for me that I could kind of get better for myself. And then that's always huge to have these aha moments for yourself, because then I can say confidence to people, like,
exactly,
this is what I'm doing on myself. Like, this is what, and then I'm helping my parents, my nieces and nephews, my brothers and sisters, and, and they're having huge changes. So of course I feel confident to pass these on to my patients, to, people who are very closely tested for what they're taking, like these athletes, they're trusting me, and I'm having to trust these products. And so I do wholeheartedly, like very much so. And I find that they're game changers, because we can change our diet all we want. And we can feel a lot better, and we can do lifestyle measures. But, when we're not getting down to the root cause of what's going on, and our world is so toxic now, it's almost impossible for our bodies to do this on its own at this point.
Right.
So I find the products have just been, like I said, game changers for me.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned you always go back to your story, because it seems like everyone in this field seems to have some type of story or another. I mean, we're mostly trained to use the medical mainstream type of medicines and stuff until we have something that happens to us or a family member, and then we really want answers.
Yeah, I know.
And then we dig through every research that we can, and then we find something like CellCore, which I agree, it's a game changer. I was actually offered a job to work with them. I wasn't seeking a job. I had my business. And after thinking about it and praying about it, I realized, wait a second, I'm helping all these people with this protocol and with these supplements, and they're seeing amazing results. And I know I've been there as a practitioner, where you're kind of just throwing a bunch of things at people because you're seeing all these different things happening at once.
Yeah.
And this really helps us just step by step take people through something that's really effective, that, sometimes in step or phase 5 or 4, you shouldn't be dealing with that as much as what you need to be dealing with in the beginning, which is moving your bowels, like you said.
Exactly.
And then if you don't move the bigger pathogens, like those big parasites, then how are we going to have a nice detox when we start removing radiation and heavy metals? I mean, we're just not going to feel very good. So I 100% agree. It starts with ourselves. There's so many things that I've done for myself too. And even just recently, I found I had this chemical toxicity just by doing a Great Plains test.
Oh
I
yeah.
would have never known that if I didn't do that. So I started upping my HMET, my Mito ATP, and some of the other therapies I do, and
Hmm.
it's incredible. And then talking about the gut brain connection. I mean, our mental
Hmm.
clarity is better, our energy is
Yeah.
better. I mean, you
Sleep.
are one intelligent woman. I mean, I already knew you were smart when I talked to you, and then even just picking your brain now, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this girl knows so much. So just the fact that you're able to learn and process that much information is in of itself, to me, shows that this works. When you were talking about how you were just barely walking, trying to get using the wall to, I mean, you can't process information the way you process information now, right?
No, and also I had chronic fatigue as well, and I couldn't. My brain wasn't working. Like I was having the symptom where you're reading the same line over and over. Like I couldn't learn anymore. I went from like a straight A student my whole life to like I can't read a paragraph and focus on it, and I had chronic fatigue, and I knew I was going into a career where I had to use my body, so I was like, I'm not going to last in this. So these types of protocols, and even um, the amount of people I was able to see and the amount of people I can help now because these companies have helped me is just huge.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's what's key. I feel like I had another company that has different products that I use, like not supplement products, but like healing pads and things of that sort.
Yeah.
And he had talked to one of my customers and about an issue that she was having, and resolved it real quickly. And apparently, she was ranting and raving about her services with me. And he comes back, he's like, "Well, I guess you're the go-to girl, because this girl is ranting and raving about you." And the first thing I thought of is like, the only reason I can do this is because I have companies like CellCore, and Therasage was the other one, that I get their healing pads and water systems and things like that. And the only reason
Yeah.
I could do this is because I have companies I partner with that
I
really have solved the problem for us. I just was smart
know.
enough to look for the answers,
I know.
and
I know,
find these
but
people.
it's all about getting it out there, and like when you're on like the front lines working with people and seeing the great results.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, totally. So let's tie this back to the athletes. So I know you're doing the CellCore protocol with the athletes as well. So let's talk about their cognitive function. How is this improving that?
So, I mean, even just speaking to them, one person in particular, I mean, I would treat him a lot, and we never really even spoke that much. He was just kind of quiet until like, you know, and always on his phone. And I realized with him, like he was starting to converse more, like, and I just saw a more of a mental clarity, more of a presence. And I don't even know if I said it to that person, but his cognition, like he didn't have to ask me questions numerous times over and over again. So even just that, like I would tell this person one instruction and then I would leave, and then they were asking me again what it was, and then I was sending them a video, and then the next day, I'm not even kidding, they were like, what was that thing? And I'm like, well, you can just scroll up. Like I noticed those kind of things
Mm.
even better. So I think that, not only for performance, but actual, and like they need proper cognition also for quick kind of responses on the ice. And so you're seeing them respond better, not get hit as much because they're kind of quicker. And I just feel like for their brain, it's, I mean, not just for performance, but so they don't get degeneration in their brain. It's
Mhm.
been really cool watching them.
Yeah. What about emotionally as well too?
Yeah, so less anxiety, like I said, anxiety was a
Mhm.
huge one for a lot of them. And it's the same media pressures are still there, but their ability to cope gets better. And we know that happens when the cell's less toxic, when the gut is balanced, because, there's certain studies that I was reading, and they're treating anxiety with like high dose lactobacillus rhamnosus, and that increases GABA. So, because we can all have the same stressors, but one day we're spiraling out of control, and then the next day we're better and we're able to sleep. So I'm noticing that's improving with them, and that's a lot of the main complaints for a lot of them. So it's helping a ton by lowering that toxic load and rebalancing the gut and getting the drainage going. So it helped for me too, because like I said, I suffered with anxiety and, sense of impending doom, and, just when intrusive thoughts,
Mhm.
intrusive thoughts where you're worried about people dying or whatever, like a lot of them, when I started saying that that's what I was having, they're like, that's what I get, and so
Mhm.
by clearing out everything that we talked about, then they have much less of that, and the same stressors are still present.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Can you imagine how many people with this coronavirus, you know, this is already a huge challenge, what we're talking about, not just with athletes, but with the general public. And then you
yeah,
throw something like the coronavirus and being on lockdown and
I
who knows
know,
what's happening in the world on top of that.
I
I
know.
mean, you were already feeling like this before any of this even happened, right?
Yeah,
And I can't even imagine how people are going to respond that haven't done a protocol like this.
I know. I feel like it's a good time for everyone to start, because we're all like, it's time for people to focus on their health, because if you look at coronavirus and who it kills, it's everyone with comorbidities that being in this type of lifestyle and doing these protocols help to correct, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think if anything, it needs to open up, like, or give us a whole new view on the way to look at how we're actually dealing with these chronic issues that people have. And maybe it'll be a wake up call, because, everyone thinks that you can just create a vaccine for this, and then it morphs. Like, these are smart microbes, like, and I think it's actually a very important time to highlight that these tiny little invisible microbes are wiping humans out. So how can we not think of how important it is to take care of our gut microbiome, right? Like, because you can't
Yes.
see it, so people can't, they don't understand, they can't understand how much our health depends on it, like,
Hmm.
because it's invisible. It's like, oh, these invisible bugs are like protecting me. Well, this invisible bug is literally killing thousands of people. So can we give respect to the bugs now? Like, you know
Oh my gosh. I bet you anyone that's listening to this podcast is probably like, aha.
right, like,
The way you explained that was just so profound. I mean, it is. It goes back to the bugs. And if we have things like glyphosate, radiation,
mhm,
and these are okay, these are invisible bugs that we're
yeah,
up against. It's a demon we can't even see.
I know,
What about the ones that are bigger? I mean, when people start taking that mimosa pudica, I mean, some
I
big
know.
stuff starts to come out of them that they're just like, I can't believe that was living in me. I mean, I had some of that too myself.
So did I, yeah. You're like, okay, wow. And if you think of how long the intestine is and how much can be living in there, like if you were to unravel our small intestine, I think, what do they say? It could go around a tennis court twice or something. Like, can you imagine like what's lurking in there now after you do like these protocols? Like, you're like, or you start to see what's lurking in there. So I think it's eye-opening. And you're right, those bigger parasites, they also house these smaller viruses, retroviruses, all of these toxins. So like, get them out. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, and I've been talking about certain types of antivirals people can do and things of that sort.
mhm,
And I've had people reach out to me because I've been talking about the coronavirus and some things that they can do. But really, once I start getting them on the phone, I realize they just need to do this protocol.
I
And we need to
know.
kind of figure out where they're at, because I could start giving them antivirals, and that's mostly like phase 3 and phase 4. But what if they don't
Exactly.
even have phase 1 conquered and their gut is all plugged up? You want to start
Mhm.
moving out bigger, these smaller pathogens that you can't even, you might have a blockage in there. Your bowels aren't
I know.
even moving. You're not
We're
going to
only
feel very
touching the
good.
surface with the virus things. Like, I've been talking to people about, okay, when you get home, rinsing out your nose, like cleaning your ears. I'm talking about biomolecular oxygen and using like silver hydrosalts just to get those, so we're not spreading these invisible bugs to people, because we know that they just manifest in there until, if you even get symptoms, because healthier people aren't really exhibiting any symptoms half the time. So that's kind of like, I'm coaching people on that. But really, yeah, when you're going to get to the point where you're actually creating health, like, you have to do what we were just talking about, and that's draining, getting the bigger bugs, then getting those retroviruses and those deeper cleans, like, and then working on the immune system. But we didn't even mention the mitochondria, like how important is the
Right.
mitochondria?
Yeah, go ahead and talk about that.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, we all learn about the mitochondria even in high school. I always kind of bring that up to people. Most of the time they don't remember the Krebs cycle or anything because obviously it's from a long time ago. But part of my journey to getting better, or actually the thing that got me into functional medicine when they started throwing out things like multiple sclerosis at me, I found Dr. Terry Walls, and it was through her TED Talk that got me into functional medicine. So, and it's called Minding Your Mitochondria. And she talks about all of the things that your mitochondria needs to function. And I've done thousands of organic acid tests, which in the organic acid, you can see each step of the Krebs cycle. And if people are in need of the cofactors that help you make energy, because that's for those of people listening that don't know what the mitochondria does, I like to explain it as it's a smaller cell within the cell because it does have its own, mitochondrial DNA and all of that. So anyways, I'm going off topic, but it makes energy at a cellular level. We cannot function when our mitochondria aren't working, right? That's when we start exhibiting disease or symptoms that can turn into disease. So when I'm doing tests on people that it shows me each step of the mitochondria where the last step is cellular energy, we see that almost no one is doing a great job, right? So we always have to support the mitochondria. So that's why it was amazing when they came out with Mito ATP, because it's like a power charger for our mitochondria.
Yeah. Yeah, that one definitely is a game changer as well. At first, I was a little slow to pick it up, and then until I was hearing other people's stories,
Yeah.
because it is a little bit of an expensive supplement. So you want to know if you're
Oh yeah.
promoting it, why,
Yeah.
and if
No,
it
for
works,
sure.
then I will promote it. But I
Yeah.
had to test that one on myself at first too, and I definitely have been feeling that kind of perk timer where you're just like, oh my God, this is amazing. Oh my God, I'm
Yeah.
detoxing. Oh my God,
Yeah.
this is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm
Yeah, for
detoxing.
sure. So you definitely have to start people off slow with that. But yeah, I've been supporting people's mitochondria in other ways, obviously, because this wasn't available to us.
Mhm.
So there are some great products that are like covering all the bases of what our mitochondria needs. But this one seems to they seem to make products that just really like get into the cell, like
Right. Yeah, it's so
quickly.
nanoparticleized. You can't even see it. I mean, you put it in your water and you can almost even barely taste it.
Mhm.
So it's nice even for children because you can sneak it in there and they
I
don't even
know.
know. Or
Yeah.
people that are very taste sensitive too. Um,
Yeah.
and it does a job. So
Yeah.
yeah. You had mentioned the oxygen too. That's been one of my favorites lately as well well, it's just in general, there's so many good things about it, but
Yeah.
from the athletes to the coronavirus. So why don't you expand on some of that?
Well, I mean, oxygen is obviously very important we can't survive without oxygen, but like for it to get to our actual cells, like it needs to be highly bioavailable, which I mean, one thing with the biomolecular oxygen is you can use it because oxygen's also an antiviral, antibacterial, because these bugs don't like oxygen. They're anaerobic, which means they like low oxygen, and that's where they thrive. So you have that effect. Like I know someone with chronic sinusitis that I had them doing a rinse with the biomolecular oxygen through their neti pot, and that helped to get rid of that. You can take it orally, you can nebulize it, so you can actually use it in so many different ways. They think they call it like the Swiss Army knife of their kind of products because you can use it in so many ways, and it's just so beneficial for oxygenation of tissue. And we were talking about the mitochondria, and the mitochondria needs oxygen to function, to make the most energy for us, and the least byproducts. So I think that it's just, and you can't access liquid oxygen anywhere else. Like there was one company that makes those aerosol pumps that a lot of the guys were using to breathe in, but it's like an aerosol can, which is not very environmentally friendly. And I know even people that are on ventilators can take this biomolecular oxygen and be off their ventilator for a few hours. So I think
Wow.
it's just
Yeah.
amazing product. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very powerful for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So my last question to you is, if we don't really start cleaning up people's guts, like even taking this up to a whole nother notch, like what do you think is going to happen in this world?
I mean, we already kind of talked about it. We see how these little tiny bugs are wiping people out. And I think that if we don't get ahead of this and start really getting this out there to the masses where everyone knows that, like, if we think about our dogs, like people deworm their dogs like twice a year, and yet we never like do any sort of cleanse like that for ourselves. So I think that if we're going to stop these chronic diseases from taking over, then these are going to be the protocols and the medicine of the future, and it's all preventative. Like, we don't want to get to a point where we are at the mercy of an invisible virus, right? And this is how we strengthen ourselves. If this virus came out 10 years ago when I was suffering, I would have had it by now, and maybe I feel like I could have been taken out by anything. I felt very vulnerable. And I think that these products and these protocols, they're making you feel stronger, like that vulnerability that people who aren't well know what I'm talking about when they hear that word vulnerable. And you don't want to feel that way. So it's empowering for your body to feel strong. And then we can work on the mental, emotional, and all the other things that empower us even more. So I feel like this is just the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right, Dr. Steph. So where can people find you if they want to find you, if they are interested in working with you or looking at your research and things of that sort?
So we're doing a whole revamp, and I've been, like I said, really focused on being on the front lines, and I see tons of patients in both capacities. So I'm just, to get the word out there of everything I'm doing, we're revamping my website, but right now you can find it at healyourgutfirst.com. And, you can put in your email and we'll reach out to you and we can do a call and I can explain everything we're doing. But we're working on getting way more information out there about what we are doing. And also Instagram is Vegas Clinic, or it's actually at Dr. S. Canestraro, but it's going to be changed to just Vegas Clinic. And you can find me there. And then as I ramp up my social media, you'll be able to find me everywhere.
Yeah, and that's Vegas, Vagus, not Vegas,
yeah,
like Las Vegas.
Like Las Vegas, yeah. Actually, the guy that did my marketing that came up with, or that we kind of came up together with the Vegas Clinic, he's like, it sounds like Vegas. I'm like, I don't really want it to sound like that, but anyway.
It's okay. There's a lot of athletes in Vegas, so they might.
That's true. There you go.
Or they're starting to at least have a lot more with the Raiders going there, and then you got the hockey team there too. And
they have hockey, yeah.
They have a women's basketball team. I used to live there actually.
Oh yeah,
a few months ago. I still love Vegas. They're my people.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Well, thank you guys all for listening to this wonderful show. I'm so grateful to have Dr. Steph on here, share her expertise, and really show how she's dialing in with people's gut and how it affects even athletes and the general public in general. And so it's exciting that we have these answers and people don't need to suffer. So thanks again, Dr. Steph, for coming on the show.
Thanks so much. It was a pleasure.
All right, we'll tune in next week. I'm Dr. Jacqueline. I'm here so you know. Take care. My Super Immunity Boost Juice Guide is now available on thewellnesstrinity.com. You'll learn how to grow broccoli microgreens, the ingredients I put in my green juice, and super nutritious supplements you can add to enhance your immune system. Again, go to thewellnesstrinity.com and you'll receive your free Super Immunity Boost Juice Guide.
Thank you for listening to the Wellness Trinity podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more wellness tips to help you achieve optimal health. Don't forget to rate and review so we can continue to bring you the best content. See you on the next episode.